It's the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Tune in, tune in, tune in, tune in.
All right, everyone. Welcome to How to Build Your Real Estate Team, Part 2. If you did not catch Part 1, I highly encourage you to check it out. If you weren't here, you can definitely feel free to check it out. Very excited about this session. It's going to be a whole lot of value. I'm going to share the second part, of course, of building your team. But then, of course, I'm also going to have some Q&A, as we always do. So today we'll talk about how to find an accountant, how to find a financial institution, and also how to find a general contractor. And I'm going to share some of the mistakes that I made in some of these areas as we go through. So I'll share just tips on how you can find it, why you should consider having these folks on your team, and then I'll share some of my mistakes that I've made along the way, and we'll have some time for Q&A as well. And then as questions come up, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then at the end, I'll be sure to answer all those for you. All right, so why should you consider having an accountant on your team? So before I get into it, there are some people who like to do their accounting on their own. Some people are CPAs and investors, and they enjoy doing it on their own. They feel comfortable in being able to get all the tax breaks they need. But there are a number of reasons why I consider having a CPA on your team. Everyone talks about, real estate, there's all these tax breaks, there's all these things you can do within real estate, which is all true. But if you're not well-versed in taxes, you may want to consider having a CPA who can really help you to maximize your deductions and just maximize all the benefits and allow you to plan properly when it comes to real estate. And something else that I do want to mention, like a lot of people look at taxes as just like the thing you do once a year on like TurboTax or with your CPA during that time of the year. But I want to encourage you to think of it differently. When you find the right accountant, you should schedule either biannually or even quarterly meetings to make sure you're on track for your goals, to make sure you have a plan in place and you're not scrambling when tax time comes. Admittedly, that's what I've been doing the last couple of years, like scrambling as tax time comes. I keep things throughout the year, but what I'm doing this year is that I'm going to make sure I have a touch point with an accountant in the summertime and probably again in the beginning of Q4 to make sure that I'm on track to, meet my goals, that I know what's going on and I'm not like scrambling to organize all my stuff for tax season, because the problem with that is it takes long for you to compile everything. And then it also takes even longer for them to process because you didn't do it on time. So I've fallen into that boat, admittedly, not ashamed to say it. We're all about transparency here. So that's something I definitely want to encourage you to do. And sometimes people might be worried about the cost, right? For a good person, it's probably going to be a decent amount of money. But what I will say to you is that it's always worth the cost. It's always worth the cost to have someone who's well-versed in doing taxes for real estate investors specifically, and can help you to maximize the tax benefits of real estate. And one other thing I would say is when you find somebody, you want to make sure they're a CPA. They don't necessarily have to be a CPA. That's my personal preference. Some folks have their taxes done by folks who are not CPAs. That's totally up to you. But if you do decide to go with a CPA, I do recommend you just look up their license and make sure that they're actually practicing an active CPA. And states have different databases where you can find that kind of information. So how can you find a good accountant? So referrals, I would say first. So as a real estate investor, right, you're building this team. You have agents, you have maybe a property manager, you have other investors, you have contractors, and all these other people on your real estate team. That's probably going to be the first place that I would suggest to find an accountant, right? So investors, right? Somebody's doing their taxes. So if you happen to know an investor, that's a great way to start. Your real estate agent, very likely to know an accountant or know somebody who knows an accountant or can ask their other clients. So, that's another good one. And then wholesalers, even, wholesalers, if you work with a wholesaler who's bringing you deals, under market deals, I'm sure they got to get their taxes done too, right? Because they get paid on commission pretty much. So when you're in positions like that, like an agent, it's honestly advantageous to work with an accountant or a tax professional who can really help you structure your stuff properly. And so that's where I would go as a resource to find an accountant. And something that I recommend everyone doing is to join your local real estate investment association. This is honestly one of the biggest networking hacks I would say, because you're in a group of like-minded individuals, you go to all these meetings, you share resources, and then you can also ask who they use, ask who their accountant is, who does their books, and so forth. And if you are kind of on the shyer side and you don't really do like the in-person networking type of stuff, Facebook is your friend, right? So you can go to a Facebook group and you can go to a Facebook group and for example, I'm in the Dayton Investors Facebook group. If I want to look for an accountant in Dayton, for example, which I don't, my accountant's based here in California, but just an example, if you live in Dayton or wherever you live, find the real estate investing group on Facebook. And then from there, you can, just type in accountant and see what the results are, see what people are saying. And that's another great way to get some leads. And then lastly, you can even ask family and friends, if they work with a tax professional, CPA, who has helped them over the years and they're satisfied with those results. That's something that you may want to consider as well. All right, so financial institution. So we're talking about the money now, which you all know is super important. And so, I think it's kind of straightforward, but, you'll need financing of some kind eventually. You can't, you need some type of financing, unless you're sitting on cash and you can put cash towards every deal. You'll need some kind of financing, whether you're refinancing properties, whether you want lines of credits or different creative financing, whether you even use private money, eventually you're probably going to need some type of bank financing. And so it's super important to build relationships with banks. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that now. And like I said, not everyone can do cash. Not everyone has 50, 100K, however much it is to put towards a deal. And so this is where leverage comes into play. You can bring a little bit to the table and an institution can bring the rest, right? Wouldn't it be great to put 20% down as opposed to 100% and still be able to make a profit? So that's one of the reasons why it's super important to have a financial institution on your team. And something else to note is you should consider small local banks, credit unions. They tend to have more flexibility in how they structure things. And if you think about it, a small community bank, they're incentivized to provide loan products and invest in the community that they are in, right? Whereas a Chase or Wells Fargo, they have plenty of people coming to their door all the time. So, they may not necessarily be as incentivized, if you will, to creatively structure deals. I've interviewed hundreds plus people who invest in real estate all over the country. And one of the recurring themes has been working with small local banks because they can creatively structure deals. So I've heard of people getting 100% financing for the purchase and rehab, getting excellent construction loans, being able to get lines of credit, personal loans. I've heard a lot more of those stories with small local banks and credit unions than I have for some of the big players. So there's definitely something that you can consider. And the other thing is, you may find a bank, right, that is great. You've closed a couple of deals with them, they're doing all your financing. What I would encourage you to do is try to have several good relationships, because you never know what's going to happen one day. Your favorite person at that bank might work somewhere else, or anything can happen. So you want to make sure that you have relationships with several banks. So how can you find a bank to work with? Again, you're gonna hear me say this a lot. You probably have heard me say this a lot. Referrals, referrals. So real estate agents, right? Think about a real estate agent. It's to their benefit to be able to have financing lined up for their clients, right? It's to their benefit to be able to do that for their clients. So a real estate agent, wholesaler, those are the first two that you may want to consider. Like whoever's bringing you deals, you want to consider talking to them because they typically will have leads for financing. And again, investors, your local your local real estate investment association, your local Facebook group as well. And again, I've talked about this before, but some of you might be part of a credit union. If you are, talk to them. Say, hey, I'm an investor. I'm looking to invest in some property. What are some of your loan products you offer? What is some of the financing you offer for purchasing investment property? Do you offer any lending and products for rehab and things of that nature? And they'll let you know. They'll let you know. And if you have a family member who's a veteran, see if they're open to referring you to their credit union. If you have somebody who's for example, a family member who is a Navy veteran and they're part of Navy Federal, see if they'd be open to referring you and getting you set up with an account there so you can start to build some banking relationships there. And then we already spoke about considering small banks and the importance of that. And again, as you have questions, as you're taking notes and things come to mind, definitely drop them in the chat. And at the end, we'll be sure to address all of those. All right. So this is a good one. This is a good one. Before I get into it, there are two sides to this, right? Some investors never use a property manager and they never want to use a property manager. Other investors are the complete opposite. They don't ever want to self-manage. They don't want to deal with any of that stuff. And neither one is wrong. Neither one is wrong. I've been on both sides of the coin. I had a property manager probably my first year or so. And the last year and a half, I've been self-managing. So I've been on both sides, and this currently is just my preference. However, I think it's important to make sure that you understand like what to do and what to look for if you do want to look for a property manager, because it's totally fine if that's what you want to do. All right, so you should hire a property manager, or you should at least consider it if you don't want to self-manage. If you're like, what, I don't have time, like I'm too busy, my job is too crazy, I just don't have time to manage this property, then you should definitely consider it. And in short, they collect rent, they set up repairs, they find tenants, and they deal with the day-to-day. In my experience with the property manager, the money came, I think, by like the 10th. My money minus their fee, which was 10%, came around the 10th. And if they were repairs above a certain amount, they always had to let me know when they let me know. And so that's pretty much how it worked. If there were repairs above a certain amount, they let me know and I had to approve it. And so there's multiple things I want you to consider when it comes to hiring a property manager. So the first thing is cost. Typically it's 8 to 10% of the rent. And you want to make sure that it's based off of the occupied units. You want to make sure it's based off of the occupied units. So you don't want to work with a property manager who is going to tell you that their fee is based on the units in general, whether or not they are occupied. So for example, let's say you have a property that rents for $800 a month and the fee is 10%, which is $80 a month. If the property is not rented and they're set up such that you give them that money, whether it's rented or not, run away. Just run. Okay. The next thing you want to consider is their placement fee. Okay. So typically property managers have a placement fee that could be up to the entire month of rent that will go to them if they place a tenant, or an amount lower than that, but it can be up to that. So that's something that you want to consider as well. Make sure when you're talking to these different companies that you ask them like, hey, like, what is your lease up fee?
Hi everyone, Sam here from the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Make sure to hit that notification bell and that subscribe button and to visit us at blackrealestatedialogue.com.